Okay, this is my project on Donatello. I chose him for the Renaissance Artists Project. Introduction. Donatello was born in 1386 in Florence, Italy, and he died December 13th, 1466, also in Florence. You might have heard of Donatello before because he was widely considered one of the greatest artists in the Renaissance era. He was mostly famous for his sculptures. His main materials were marble and bronze, which was unseen or unheard of at the time. He was always viewed as a strange man by his peers, and he never got married or had kids to carry on his legacy. His unique perspective on his sculptures was making the people in them nude, and most of the work was inspired by the Medici family. More about Donatello. People assume that Donatello got his inspiration from the stone carving sculptures in the Cathedral of Florence around the early 1400s when he was very young. His first work was known as the Statue of David, and his work on this alluded to another famous artist, Ghiberti. The David sculpture was initially supposed to be for the cathedral, but instead it was moved into the Palazzo Vecchio, which was the name of the city hall. Other famous sculptures he made were Saint Mark and Saint George. Both of these sculptures were finished at the same time, and they were both made for the exterior of the church or Saint Michel. Common misconceptions may include the fact that he made a sculpture of David, and Michelangelo also made a sculpture of David, but they are two completely different sculptures. Formal theory. Donatello made a lot of sculptures in his lifetime. The most famous one was David. David is the king of the Hebrew Bible. David is very famous in the Bible for the story of David versus Goliath. His nude body is that of an adolescent and is sharply contrasted with the heavy beard and maturity of Goliath. Donatello made the sculpture of David naked because he based it off of ancient Greek and Roman statues. Spinario is a sculpture that inspired him to make David nude, but in the David sculpture he's holding a sword in his right hand and a stone in his left hand. The message that Donatello tried to get across in the sculpture is that he wasn't strong because of physical power, but rather that of his will to follow the word of God helped him no matter what he faced. Expressive theory. Because Donatello made sculptures, this means that his art was very abstract. Typically, sculptures were made of people that may be famous from the Bible or some sort of religious relation. Donatello was very inspired from sculptures made before him, but he also had his own unique style of his sculptures. Donatello is the first person to make nude sculptures, and this was something that he was widely known for. A naturalistic theme can be found prominently throughout his sculptures. This is based mostly from the Roman Catholic Church. He also demonstrated roots of realism and classicism throughout his art. People during the Renaissance typically made art based off the artist's personality and beliefs. This is why Donatello made his sculptures nude, because he liked the representation of naturalism. The marble statue of David and/or St. George Tabernacle proved the Donatello special interest in Gothic mannerism. Contextual theory. Donatello studied ancient Roman art and architecture. These works of art inspired him to reuse these techniques and ideas in his sculptures. This was one of the major classical art ideas that inspired Donatello's style. A lot of his works show shades of ancient Roman and Greek art, and the Medici family was a big inspiration. His works were typically used for churches, private collections, or public buildings. All of them had similar ideas throughout them, such as religious, civic, or even the social values of people. Donatello also let people determine a lot of the themes and common things in his art, depending on what was going on during that time. He found social and political things that were very important to include in his art. Bronze and marble were considered very innovative materials, and this was truly an original thing that Donatello did. Other people found these materials hard to work with or even difficult to obtain, but Donatello always prevailed with his work. The Renaissance is considered a very religious time for everybody, and Donatello demonstrates that plenty in his art. He typically uses a deep sense of human emotion with facial features or the position of the body. This gives us a very good representation of the medieval era. In conclusion, Donatello was a very influential artist of the Renaissance era. His unique image of the sculptures really gives us a good look into that time period. He liked to make his art based off religious items like people or events, like David versus the Goliath. David is one of the most famous sculptures of all time and has a very big meaning religiously and in general. There is so much to talk about with Donatello, but it's safe to say that he's a very influential, inspiring, and incredibly talented sculptor. And those are my works cited.